So I don't know the official name for it, but I'm going to call it funding rate arbitrage because we're going to be playing around with perpetual futures and the funding rates that you see here on Mango Markets and on Drift Protocol. So how this works is we're taking advantage of the difference in funding rates between Mango Markets and Drift. So going on to the SOL Perps, we can see that the average funding rate right now is 58.19% APR, meaning that people who are long the Solana perpetual futures on Mango Markets have to pay 58.19% APR on their position to simply stay long. And that money goes to people who are short the Solana perpetual futures. And so this is in order to keep the perp price in line with the actual underlying price of Solana itself. So we go over here, we can see that the perpetual futures price is actually higher by about 20 cents than the actual spot price of Solana itself. And in order to get that back down to the actual Oracle price, we have funding rates, which encourage people to close their long positions. So it seems that people are very bullish when it comes to being long Solana on Mango Markets. If we go over to Drift, we can see that the opposite has occurred. So the funding rate is actually negative, meaning that people who are short Solana are paying an 80% APR to actually stay short Solana. Now, the difference in this, I think, exists from the fact that Mango Markets has been around a lot longer. A lot of people know how to use it, and it actually uses a order book approach to actually do all of the trades, whereas Drift uses a virtual dynamic automatic market maker, meaning that you're actually trading against a pool and not against other people in the order book. So how this trade is going to play out, so we're going to actually go ahead and short the Solana perpetual futures here and then collect the 58% a year funding rate, and then long the Solana perpetual futures here and collect the 80% funding rate. So I'll visually demonstrate how this will work. So let's just say we have $200 to execute this strategy. I wouldn't put a lot of money into this because there is a lot of risks actually that come in when you're actually executing a strategy like this. So only a small amount. So there are actually a lot of risks that I will talk about later in this video when you're executing a strategy like this. And most of it is just monitoring what actually happens to the funding rates on Mango Markets and Drift. So we have $200. We're going to take $100 and then go short on Mango Markets to collect that funding rate, which is like 57%. And so that's 57%. Let me just write that here. So you're getting paid to short on Mango Markets, which is nice. And then we're going to take $100 and then go long the Solana perpetual futures on Drift. And that's currently paying out. Let's just call that 80% for now. 80%. So effectively what you've done here is create a delta neutral position because your $100 worth of long and your $100 worth of short have cancelled each other out. So 100 minus 100 is of course 0. You have a delta of 0, meaning that you have 0 price exposure to where Solana goes in the long term. And to calculate how much yield that you'd receive by doing this, we're going to add these two numbers together. So that's 137%. So you're getting 137% a year on $200 worth of stablecoins, essentially. I mean, that's what you're doing. You've deposited $100 worth of USDC onto Mango Markets, $100 worth of USDC onto Drift, gone long on one, gone short on the other, and this is the yield that you've now generated by doing this trade. So I'll show you guys actually how to do this. So now that I've deposited some money onto Mango Markets and Drift, I can show you actually how to execute this strategy. So we need to go to Mango Markets, SOL Perp, and then we go over here to sell. So we want to go short the Solana perpetual futures on Mango Markets, and we want to do $100 worth. So I'm just going to market sell. So sell 0.42 perps. We'll approve this. So if we go down here to positions, we can see that I'm now short 0.42 SOL. And if I go back here to Drift, I'm going to need to do the same, but I'm going to need to go long. So I'm going to long this market order, and it's 0.42. And we're going to long that SOL. So that's great. We've now set up the trade. What I like about Drift is that the unrealized funding P&L will come up here. So whilst the unrealized P&L might go down, say if the price of Solana went down, we'd still actually be collecting the funding rate that is currently here. So if I just left this position, and let's just say the price of Solana went sideways for the rest of the year, my unrealized funding P&L, also assuming that the funding rate was the same, would be $77. So that's the way that you'd work it out. But if we go back to Mango Markets here, we can see that I'm short, and I'm also going to collect the funding rate, and I'm also going to be collecting that 57.29% funding rate as well from here. So I recorded most of this video yesterday, and now today, because the market has dumped heavily, we've had a reversal of what we saw earlier on in this video. So instead of the Solana perpetual futures on Mango Markets being, a positive funding rate, it's now negative 64%. And if we go into Drift, instead of it being a negative funding rate, it's now extremely positive at 137%. So what you would do is you just reverse the trade and you can still make money. So instead of going short on Mango Markets, you now flip to long. And instead of going long on Drift, you now flip to short. So potentially, if you wanted to, you could actually boost the yields that you receive from doing this funding rate arbitrage even more if you wanted to start using leverage. But the risk of that is that you could potentially get liquidated if we have a wild move. So you'd either need to automate a setup or be at your computer all the time so you could make sure that you don't actually get liquidated. So if we calculate the funding rates that we could harvest right now, so we got 74% plus 53, so that's like 137%. So you could potentially harvest 260+% APR from doing this strategy if you're using 2x leverage, and then you could do even more if you're using 3x leverage, but at 3x leverage you're really playing with fire there. So just keep that in mind if you were considering using leverage. So now that I've shown you the strategy, I want to warn you about some of the risks involved in actually going ahead and doing this. And one of the risks that I wanted to talk about is the actual changing in the funding rate. So as you can see, when I started this video to now, the funding rate has changed by quite a bit. So if I go here, the funding rate was 80% on Drift, and it was 57% here on Mango Markets. But it's changed a bit of Drift already. And as more and more people come onto Drift, that funding rate is going to come closer to actually zero. And that funding rate over time is actually going to come closer to zero as more and more people actually start trading on Drift. So this strategy's life cycle might actually decay over time. But I have noticed that Perpetual Protocol, which is a very similar product, it also uses a virtual AMM. But Perpetual Protocol on Ethereum actually has its funding rate be negative most of the time, despite being in a raging bull market. And I expect Drift Protocol to mostly behave the same because they have the same sort of mechanism for actually doing trades. So the funding rates can change quite a bit, so you're going to have to monitor this position like 3-4 times a day. So if you can't actually be monitoring your position that much, then this strategy really isn't going to be that useful for you, because it can turn on a dime if we have like a bear market, for example. And then this strategy will most likely no longer be profitable because the funding rates for SOL on Mango Markets are going to go negative as well. And if they do, it means you're going to start losing money if you're short on Mango Markets. And one thing that I did want to mention regarding risks is that whether you're going short, be it Mango Markets or Drift, you will need to manage the collateral over time, because you could potentially actually get your position liquidated if the price of Solana actually doubles from wherever you're going short from. So over time, you need to rebalance your long and your short to make sure there is an appropriate amount of collateral there for you to keep the trade open. Another risk that you have to be aware of is that both of these protocols are like still new. They're not really battle tested. There isn't a lot of hacks or rug pulls going on Solana right now because it's really difficult to actually deploy any code. So just know that these two protocols are still susceptible to actually getting drained. So just be aware of that. Don't put life-changing sums of money into any of these protocols, because all it takes is one of these to go wrong, and then someone to run away with a lot of money, and it might ruin you. So definitely keep that in mind, and just remember that none of this is financial advice. Ape responsibly. Make sure to do your own research when it comes to the matters of your own finances. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one.